Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. I'm recording this in the middle of Anime Detour. I got done with my first day. Turns out it went pretty well. The Dr. Robotnik cosplay did work out, and did work out to many people's satisfaction. And the first day went great. I've got some time. One of the panels was canceled, the early one for 10:30 this morning, so I don't have to be there until 2. Like 1 or 2, I think. And that means that gives me time to record this. So, might as well take the... Don't look a gift horse in the mouth and just do it. So this is an episode that's going to go in a couple of weeks. I still have to do my rundown of the convention itself next week. But I have Chrono already set up, but we're going to do this episode. And today's episode, as you can see, is about Ergo Proxy. It's a show I'd heard about and seen. I knew it was a show that was on the weirder side. I might have even seen like a couple of episodes, but I just wasn't into it at the time. And then last year, I gave it another shot. And while it's not perfect, and it has some definite issues, whether it be pacing or just resolving the myriad of things that it tries to accomplish, there's still a lot of things that this show does that ends up succeeding. Partly the visual style, and just the aura of the dystopian show that it does. Now, what sets Ergo Proxy apart, and what I think it revels in, to an extent, is the series of shows. It doesn't have really a defined genre, but it's one of those shows that, like, if you've ever seen Serial Experiments Lain, or Boogie Pop Phantom, Paranoia Agent... Like, stuff is meant to be strange for the sake of strange and offbeat and just off-kilter. This is kind of in that same vein where it does have a definite reason for existing. It's not just, let's just throw a bunch of weird shit at the wall and make it stick. The difference I find with Ergo Proxy is it tries to add philosophy. I don't know how intentional it was at first, but the writers of the show focused on Gnosticism and raison d'etre and things of that nature. And even though it's a show about super beings and gods and a dystopia and shit like that, and almost like a detective thriller, it still has that air of philosophy and strangeness that is probably going to turn some people off. And I know for me, after a while, it did, to an extent, get a bit strange. It was mostly some of the later episodes because you're trying to take a strange concept and bleed it into 23 to 26 episodes. The standard length of a show until things started to become 12. Because for a while, I think 26 was the gold standard, and now it's like 12 or 13 because it's easier to just produce something for 12 episodes. I think this succeeds, but I also think it could have been an episode or two longer or an episode or two shorter, depending on what they were going for. And while there are some episodes that kind of work in its favor, you do have to be in that mindset. You do have to be in that, I want something strange, but I also want something exciting, but I also want something deep, and I also want something just different. Because this isn't a normal show that fits a genre description. It fits the dystopian thriller detective thing, whatever, but it is its own thing at the end of the day, and it helps. But you have to be in the right mindset. You have to want these shows. So bear that in mind when I review it and talk about the plot, because there's a lot to get into and a lot of characters to talk about. And I'm going to do my best not to spoil everything that goes on, but think of this kind of half spoilerly. I'm getting the words wrong. Spoilerly, say that 5 times fast, but also keeping it in line so I'm not giving everything away. So I'm not going to do a spoiler tag for this, but I'm going to do my best to at least not overdo it. We'll start with the characters. So unlike last time, like either you start with a plot or you start with characters. And I think I'll start with characters and build the plot from there. And we'll start with, there's two main characters. When you see a main character first, you kind of think that they're going to be the main and it's going to be that way. This is one of those things where a main character was supposed to be a main character, then it got switched halfway, and then they ended up kind of being co-main characters. So bear that in mind. It's an interesting concept. Like one of the main characters shows up and then the real main character shows up. So they end up sharing the screen, which is nice. The first one we're introduced to is Riel Mayer. She's voiced by Karen Thompson, who also goes by the name Megan Hollingshead. She was... this is kind of the main role she's done, but she's in other shows, I believe, like Digimon and whatnot. But this is the show I know her most from, other than maybe some like smaller characters in some other shows. But she is played very straight-laced and no nonsense. Almost like the Major from Ghost in the Shell, if she was less like well-trained, I would suppose, and a bit more prissy. That's what I think of as Riel Mayer. She is part of a city known as Ramdo, one of the last remaining dome cities that isn't like caught in this dystopic, bleak world that has no sunlight. Apparently, people are artificially grown in labs now because there's no sunlight, there's no hope, there's no whatever. And in this city of Ramdo, which is this, bastion of morality that is left to fend for itself, it's a highly advanced society that lives on the whims of the people in the bureau. So she kind of acts like a princess kind of way. Like, think of somebody who's not a princess in name, but she is the daughter of the person who runs the organization and runs the city. But she's also a private investigator of her own. She's asked to investigate something known as the cogito virus, and there we go with the philosophy stuff. The cogito ergo sum, the I think therefore I am idea. So she's investigating a virus that is infecting a lot of robotic individuals, because humans that exist also share the world with robots that run everything or help them run everything in what are known as entourages, which, act as support characters, or companions, which are kind of like kids, younger characters, pets, I guess is the wrong term, but entourages and companions. So robots have been infected with this virus and they become self-aware, and apparently it's doing bad things to Ramdo City, and Riel Mayer is supposed to investigate with her friend and entourage Iggy, voiced by Travis Willingham. And Iggy, pretty well nice as a support character. You get the feeling that he's kind of like her Alfred and trying to keep her out of trouble, because she's not dumb, but she's naive. That's the weird thing about these characters, is sometimes like you're a hard-nosed character, but you're naive to a fault and you don't understand everything, and it's her drive to learn all this shit that turns her into a character that you like. But Iggy's there as a support character to kind of guide her and make sure she's not stepping on any toes or going against Ramdo City's like functions and realities, because he knows that she is the daughter of the guy who runs the fucking place. So it's a bad idea to make her out to be some idiot or lead her into a bad situation, which she ends up getting into because she runs into what's known as a proxy. And she runs into several of them. So a proxy is a godlike being, these like weird, shadowy, cloaked figures with superpowers. The superpowers vary, and basically they run these domes they don't know it, or they're not supposed to know it, or they have been caused amnesia, or in most cases, they know they run it, but they're not supposed to be told that they run it, or the people that do run it either devote themselves to it, or don't even tell the proxies themselves that they are the unseen rulers or whatever. So there's this weird, like, one of the proxies meets Rael at the end of the first episode, and that's where the main characters lie. You have this other person known as Vincent Law, voiced by Liam O'Brien, this scared, 20-something guy, not sure of himself, and she kind of takes the lion's share of the action for the first couple episodes, and then once he starts being established as a character that doesn't really know what the fuck's going on, you start noticing that he himself is the proxy. He himself is what is known as Ergo Proxy, and people know who he is. He doesn't know, and he is trying to find his way back to a city known as Mosque. So that's kind of what's driving him after a few episodes. He needs to get out of Ramdo with or without Rael and Iggy's help, all while avoiding the law, but also trying to get the fuck out. But also understanding that he's supposedly human, but also this proxy character. He doesn't know what the fuck a proxy is. He's that sort of amnesiac, but not really kind of thing. They're also joined by another robot. And before I mention it, the robots, the technical term for them are auto-raves. So I will go into that a little bit more. So the auto-raves are the entourages and the companions. One of the companions who was infected is known as Pino, voiced by Rachel Hirschfeld, and she's just the nice, bubbly, child character. She ends up becoming like that surrogate child, and that's exactly what she is. She was designed by other people to be the companion for some other characters, but she ended up in the care of Rael and Vincent, and they kind of joined the main goal after about 5 or 6 episodes is them riding into different cities and different domes and just traveling this dystopian world. But she's not supposed to. It turns out that she joins them just because she finds them and gets protected by them and then joins them on their journey. But she was originally designed to be a companion to who I would consider the main antagonist of the show, Raoul Creed, voiced by Patrick Sates. And there are several different departments. You've got the administrative bureau, you've got some other, higher end bureaus and things. I believe administrative bureau is the main one that focuses on police and special investigations and shit like that. And Raoul is the leader and runs everything under the auspices of Rael's father, who is Donav Meyer. He has his own agenda. He's not sure what the fuck's going on either, but he's also this weird, villains. They're high and mighty, or they believe they are the ones who should be running everything, or they believe that people should be bowing or kowtowing to them, despite the fact that he is serving somebody else. You get this sense that he's not there by choice. He's being torn between what he wants as an ambition versus what he's supposed to do as a job. He is joined by Kristeva, who is an entourage, voiced by Kirsten Potter, and she's like a motherly figure. So you can already kind of see where this is going. Raoul as a human, Kristeva as an entourage auto-rave, much like Iggy is for Riel, acting like a mother figure, sort of, but not really. And then Pino, who was supposed to be like a surrogate child for Raoul, but now is in the care of the main characters. It's this weird dichotomy. Because the show is very philosophical and strange, they don't give everything right away. It's something you have to get through context clues later on, or it's easy to miss a lot of these aspects. I don't even know if Pino and Raoul interact a whole bunch. I don't recall them interacting outside of maybe the initial episodes and then later on in the finales, because Pino is such a part of the main character story, you forget that she was Raul's surrogate daughter. So there's a lot of other stuff that goes on here. The other main character, and I guess you would consider him a villain, I guess, would be Daedalus Umeno, voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. And as strange as Raul can be, he's more straight-laced. Umeno is a doctor and researcher of all this like artificial life, and like I said, humans are artificially made, and they're made with this reason to exist sort of thing, this raison d'etre, and they have to fulfill this mission of theirs. And he gets this like weird obsession. At the beginning of the show, he's Rael's confidant, but later on you start really starting to see how fucked up in the head Umeno can be. He's torn in this situation where he's trying to help Rael, but he's also under orders from Raul unwillingly, but he has to work for the main government. So there's a lot of different competing interests. And then you realize that Umeno is more attracted to Rael than you'd hope he would be. And lots of weird shit starts happening, and he's involved in a kind of supportive, antagonistic role. It's the best way I would put it. Sort of antagonist, sort of protagonist. You don't know where his allegiances lie. But of course, it's Yuri Lowenthal, so it's played really well. What I will say is, I'm so used to like Funimation and like the recent crop of actors, it's really rare for me to go back and like watch the shows with the early 2000s to mid 2000s crop of the all-star casts from LA, from these shows or these games again. So it was really nice to like dig into a show and be like, oh good, I know I don't need to worry about this cast at all. I'm really happy, because that's one of the things that it isn't from a, oh my god, dubs are wrong perspective. It's, I don't know who these people are, but when I key into their, voice actors or whatever, I can suspend my disbelief and go, oh, okay, I'm in for a ride. I'm in for a good show. I'm happy about it. So knowing that like Travis Willingham's in it, Liam O'Brien's in it, Patrick Sates is in it, Yuri Lowenthal's in it, like, I don't need to worry about it. I'm good. I'm happy. So now it's just, is the show any good? And like I said, it depends on how strange you want strange to be, without it, being distracting. As I mentioned before, the world is destroyed. Ramdo City is the kind of main central hub for the first few and last few episodes. Or anytime you want to go back and talk to Real Creed or Donoff Meyer or Umeno, you kind of have to go back and see what the machinations of the city are. I already talked about the proxies, the virus, the raison d'etre, and anything. A lot of the show, honestly, takes place outside of Ramdo, because we talked about Vincent having this urge to visit the city of Mosque, which apparently he was the ruler of. And about 6 to 10 episodes in, they have access to, not fly, but kind of, it's almost like one of those stormtrooper ship things, when you're, in Star Wars, where you're just kind of going through the sand, like you're going through the sand at high speed. I don't know what they call those, but basically it's just a boat that they can ride in the sand to get the fuck out of the virus-infected air and shit. So as soon as they're out of Ramdo City, they start to experience a lot of different smaller scale journeys. Different proxies of different motivations. Different cities are done differently. It's not quite the same as like a Kino's journey, where everything's strange for the sake of strange because we have this set of rules and we're just experiencing these rules just for the hell of it. It's everybody has their own way of dealing with the world being destroyed. And some of them are just there to make a quick buck. Some are there to survive. Some are there to make people happy and just have fun. Some are there to lure people to their dooms and whatnot, or to find companionship or whatever. Some are there to kick the shit out of Vincent. Some of them are to teach Vincent a lesson. I don't know. midway through, it starts to get a little awkward because you have like 20 episodes of this show and you're wondering, where do they go? Because Romdo has its own thing going on, and eventually, once Vincent figures out what the fuck's going on, he and Rael and Pino have to go back to Romdo. So what are they doing to fill the time? They're giving you backstory on how people are surviving this. Whatever happened to the world, they do explain that in a strange way. They also go over what being a proxy means. But one of the episodes that I found was really strange was, and now that we're getting into, I'll say, we'll go into the negatives right now. You can see where it's hard for me to explain how this show goes without digging into it a little bit deeper, so I'll save this discussion for specifics. I'm trying to generalize without spoiling, but I'm also trying to skirt the issue because even I don't explain it too well. But digging into the negatives and positives might help make my point. What I find is the negatives for this show is not to the Eva degree where everything's an angel, everything's dead, everything's whatever. You have proxies and you have philosophy and you have raison d'etres and everything. I don't think it gets in the way of they're just super beings and they're trying to kill each other, or they're trying to survive, or the humans are trying to survive, or whatever. I think the main idea is everybody's trying to find their place in a world that has been destroyed, and everybody's trying to explain why. But when you get midway through the show, you're focusing solely on the philosophy of it and the backdrop of learning about the show and learning about why this world is the way it is, that you kind of forget where the character is and where their motivations lie. Vincent and Rael, not too much because they have been the main characters. I think it's mostly the villains. Like, you forget what their motivations are until it has to be there. So then after about 20 episodes in and you finally start getting back to the nitty-gritty and have to finish the show, you're in a situation where you go back to Romdo and everything just goes to hell for the sake of it. It's been leading up to it and you've seen little bits and pieces, but because they've been focusing on the philosophy, you forgot why we were there, and it feels like there's an episode or two missing from the situation, and it just feels the ending's a bit rushed. Because you're putting so much emphasis on the philosophy rather than the motivations of the characters themselves, so you're caught between what the characters themselves are and what the show is telling you their philosophy and their raison d'etre is. So you're getting sort of that Eva vibe where everything is masked in this philosophy, and it's like, you don't need to go that far. I think it's rushed. Despite being a 26 episode anime or 23 episodes or whatever, they rushed the final episode, and it's hard to really make, unless you've read mythology or read books on philosophy or things like that, trying to go into it blind and you're like, what? Why is this person, what are they doing? Why is this happening? Like, you don't get it. And I remember that the writers said they had a blank slate and they went full bore. It's not impenetrable words. But it is steep. So it does get distracting when you're trying to finish the show and you're trying to invest in these main characters that, for one reason or another, are on the good side or bad side, worries of degrees, that you've met and, cared about for 20 episodes, and then all of a sudden you're trying to finish their story without really understanding why the story needs to end, other than the story needs to end. So Ergo Proxy kind of suffers when it's trying to finish telling its own story, because there's too much stuff they cram into you, and your brain starts leaking. Not quite Chrono Cross or Kingdom Hearts or Metal Gear, but it is approaching that level of nuts. Almost like a Nier or Kino's Journey. That's what you're in for. You're in for like a Nier or a Kino's Journey when you're trying to figure out what the fuck this is trying to tell you. But on the positive side, The characters themselves, as they're speaking and talking, you like them. You like them journeying through all this crazy shit. You like seeing what Ramdo City is, or the bigger cities are, versus the downtrodden people outside of the domes, outside of the cities. And they do give you a few episodes in between where you see the normal people, people that are not subject to the system, subject to the reality of being in a city. You get to see a lot of dark, dystopic browns and grays and blacks, like Rael's attire. The thing that I remember most about Ergo Proxy is Rael's appearance. Rael is just pale fucking white, and she has got these like black eyeliner, black hair, black clothes with a little bit of pinks and purples mixed in. She is a distinctive looking character, and it is alluring, not in the oh my god kind of way, but in the it is an attention grabbing attire, and it works for everybody else because this really dingy, dark place is beautiful to look at. And it is a beautiful looking show that is kind of like mid 2000s, like 3D cell shaded, but it's also like still in 2D, and it has a good striking look to it without it being so distracting. There are times where it's not perfect, and I think that's what people have said. But again, I think Ergo Proxy manages to do a good job of balancing out the allure of some of the characters' designs with the just downright blown up, distorted, destroyed world appeal. The other thing I like about Ergo Proxy is when they take time to just let the characters do nothing. There was an episode midway through, or I don't know if it was called Much Ado About Nothing or whatever, where they're just stuck. Their ship is stuck. They can't do anything. They can't find anything. They can't do anything. But Rael is narrating an episode where she's going stir crazy, and you can see she's going stir crazy, but you get to see the mundanity. You get to see the time frame. You get to see her bounce off Vincent and Pino on a daily basis while she's trying to avoid going absolutely batshit nuts because she's stuck. And it's little moments like that. It's another episode where they had the balls to turn like world building into a fucking game show. Little things like that where you spend time outside of the main plot and you get to dig into the characters. And this is something that I do enjoy about Ergo Proxy, is that you do get to still enjoy who the characters are as people rather than characters as a function of the plot. And it's in those, subtle moments of nothing where you learn who these people can be and why they're driven the way they are. It does end up messing with the plot structure because, again, you spent an episode of them just sitting in a fucking tanker truck doing nothing. And yet I found that to be the most exciting episode, was them doing absolutely nothing. It's almost like one of the Cowboy Bebop episodes where they're stuck in this planet and they're eating eating poisonous shrooms, and they're just going batshit insane. Like, you see these characters in this weird place. You see these characters in Cowboy Bebop fighting this venomous viral thing from the fridge. They're not the most exciting episodes, but for a show this thick, a show this deep that is trying so hard to be philosophical and shit, the best episodes are the ones where they just shut up and let the characters just talk about jack shit. And it ends up being a sort of comedic, sort of dramatic affair of them doing absolutely nothing. At the end of the day, I find Ergo Proxy to be an interesting note that even though if you do a super philosophical kind of show, you can still succeed. And I find that even though it doesn't quite, hit the landing, one of the major parts is you try to make the opening the really fun stuff to get people excited, then you have to stick the landing. I don't think it sticks the landing. but I don't think it does so badly that it's going to be like the worst ending ever or anything. It's just going to end up having more questions than answers. But at the end of the day, if you're interested in like a weird looking show about a dystopia with interesting characters who sometimes get to do absolutely nothing but are alluring in their own way, like Riel is a physically striking looking character who has an interesting motivation because she kind of goes against the grain of the nitty gritty, badass female, but she's naive to a fault. You get Vincent, who's this namby-pamby wuss amnesiac, but he has a hidden agenda that he doesn't understand, and he's fighting back against it. Pino's there as a, nice kind of half and half between the two. So it's like these three characters bounce off each other as comic relief so well that you forget how serious the show can be. But it's not played for comedy. Or at least if it is, it's played very subtly. It is a dramatic and a thrilling show that sometimes hits its mark, and I think I enjoyed it. And I'm glad I went back and gave it a shot, even though, and that should be the thing I will end on. Just because you find a show doesn't hit with you right away, be willing to always come back to it. If you find that like a second viewing, a third viewing, you just can't get into it, then you can write it off. But maybe, a couple years down the road, you think, okay, I gave this thing a shot. I wasn't into it before, but now I'm really into this sort of thing. Ergo Proxy was one of those for me. So I would definitely watch it if you're in the mindset for a show like it. But that'll do it for me today. Next week will be Persona 5. And specifically Persona 5 Royal. How in God's name am I going to deal with that? I lose my voice after half an hour to 45 minutes, and I'm going to have to talk about Persona 5 Royal. I will do my best. The benefit is I just completed the playthrough, so God willing, I have all of the information in my head, and it is my favorite game of all time, so I could rattle it off without even thinking. I still will have a primer set up for it. God forbid, what am I going to do with it? But hey, we're going to talk Persona 5 next week. And then the week after will be Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. I got through the first season. I'm getting my way through the second at time of recording. And obviously I'm going to do as much Ghost in the Shell stuff as I can, but not all at once. If it's just the first season, I'll talk about just the first season. I imagine that's probably the best approach, is just focus on the first season, then get back to the second season on a later date somewhere. And then after that will be Metal Gear Solid. So, again, strange for the sake of strange, but also has that cachet of being Metal Gear Solid. There's a lot I can talk about with that. So we've got a few good episodes in the can here coming up, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. We're actually nearing the first year of completion of this podcast, and I have to admit I'm really, I'm just really thrilled to have been doing something like this. I know I added the Boxu unboxing thing as part of that, and I think people were enjoying those as well. But obviously the games are there, Twitch is there, these podcasts are there. I have a lot of stuff on my plate, but I'm still enjoying the hell out of it, so hopefully you guys are too. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. Feel free to comment. I'm all good for this, but I am enjoying this, and I hope to keep doing it for a long time. But that'll do it for me. Citizen Strife, signing off.